Welcome, everybody. Is my sound okay? Just checking. If you nod, that would be awesome. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar on this lovely Friday about making local media collaborations work. And we have lessons from Side Effects Public Media and the Indianapolis Recorder. And we are so excited to bring this to you because I, as a member of the American Amplified team, have been hearing about their story for the past few months, and this is really great that we get to share it. So just a little quick introduction. I am Kathy Liu. I'm the digital and social media editor at American Amplified. We have Oseye Boyd, who is the editor at the Indianapolis Recorder. And we have Dave Rosenthal, who's the managing editor at Side Effects Public Media. You'll hear a little bit more about each of their organizations in just a little bit. Just some quick housekeeping. Please share comments as the session goes along. We welcome stories and questions as we're talking. This is a very informal conversation. You can turn on your video. I know some if you want to share your faces, that would be nice to be able to see who's here. And please use the chat box or your emojis to let us know what you're thinking so far. And we'll be happy to answer questions that come up in the chat box as we go along. Just a little bit about America Amplified. If you don't know who we are, it is a 2020 community engagement journalism initiative. It is funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. There is a team, I'm part of a team of 7. We are based here in Kansas City, Missouri, out of KCUR. And we also have an editor in San Diego and another editor, a director who is in Minnesota momentarily. So, and we're working with 8 partner networks that range from New England to the Mountain West, and they involve 50+ radio stations. And Side Effects Public Media is one of our partner networks. Now a little bit more about the Recorder. Oseye.
Yes, the Recorder, as you see, is the 4th oldest African-American newspaper in the country. We are 125 years old. Something I'm really, really proud of is our legacy and our history. And I don't know many 125-year-old businesses, and definitely not many that are Black 25 years. So that's pretty amazing to me. Started off in 1895 as a 2-page church. We grew to a weekly, and we have continued through the Great Recession, through the Depression, the Great Recession, to COVID. We're still here. We're still kicking. And we also Indiana Minority Business Magazine, which is a quarterly magazine, diversity, lifestyle, and business, obviously, that goes across the whole state of Indiana. And we have 2 full-time reporters plus me as the editor.
Thank you. Dave.
Okay, yeah, hi everybody. Side Effects is a collaboration of public radio stations in the Midwest. We cover 6 states from Kentucky, Iowa on the east, Indiana and Illinois in the middle, and Missouri and Iowa on the west. And we have, we're based at WFYI in Indianapolis, and we have a larger staff there. We have 4 reporters there and a community engagement person and myself. And then we have a health reporter in each of our other 7 partner stations. And we're focused on public health issues generally. Lately, of course, we've been super busy with the coronavirus, and then also issues of health disparities that were raised by a lot of the protests around the country. So that this year, that's really been our focus.
Thank you. So just a little quick outline of what we're going to cover today. We are going to be talking about how this partnership started in 2019. We're going to talk about the one thing you need to make something like this work. We're going to talk about how the Recorder and Side Effects have covered COVID-19 and the protests, how they shared resources, and at the end, offer some advice for people who may be looking to create a similar collaboration in their community or with their local media organization. So how things started, just a real quick rundown. In 2019, Side Effects and the Recorder collaborated on a project examining Indiana's high rate of Black maternal and infant mortality. As part of the projects, they hosted panel discussions that were broadcast on Facebook Live, WFYI, and YouTube. They also coordinated several stories on coverage of the issue. And I would love for Oseye and Dave to talk about how that topic came to be and how you started that working together.
Well, so WFYI Side Effects reached out to me to work on stories and the web shows together. The relationship had started before I ever came to the Recorder, which they did a breastfeeding story or a series of stories before I came in 2018. So there was already a connection, a partnership there. So when I was asked did I want to do this these stories, there was no brainer for me, no hesitation. I thought this is something that I was already thinking about doing. I'd already been in some discussions with some people in the medical field about the high rate of infant maternal mortality when it comes to Black women and babies. I didn't know that it was an issue until they approached me. So this was just right up my alley.
Yeah, and for, sorry, just,
I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah, for Side Effects, you know, we focus on public health issues, and unfortunately, Indiana has a record of spending very little on public health. It ranks near the bottom states around the country. And so there are any number of issues that are really important and reflected, where Indiana is reflected very poorly. Maternal infant mortality is one, and it affects, you know, Black women more than white women or Latina women. So that was an issue we wanted to get into, and it, you know, the public radio audience for WFYI, like most public radio audiences around the country, is predominantly white. So it made sense to have a partner in covering a story like that who could help us understand it better and also try to expand the audience rather than the traditional audience that we would have. So those were a couple of the reasons that we linked up with the Recorder.
Where do the ideas to broadcast these panelists on Facebook Live? Because now in the time of COVID, having a Facebook Live is, you know, second nature, but this was in 2019. So where did that idea come from?
Definitely came from WFYI Side Effects, because we actually went into the studio. We had guests in the studio. So it was kind of set up like a talk show. I sat in one chair, the moderator's seat, and then the panelists all sat on the couch. So it was definitely very reminiscent of being even though it was internet based, it was definitely reminiscent of being a talk show. So looking back at it now, it was so new and creative and you know, just like, oh, we're doing this creative show now. Now it's like, yeah, this is kind of like what everyone's doing now. But it was so very new back then that we really didn't know what to expect or how it would be received or anything. It was just FYI Side Effects.
Yeah, and we had the luxury of Side Effects of starting our collaboration with a dedicated community engagement person just for Side Effects. There are also community engagement folks at the station, but having one that's dedicated to your project is really great because you know, they can really focus on the content and figure out ways to distribute it creatively. So we had done community events in person and, you know, wanted to try out the digital engagement as well. So yeah, it was doing it a couple years ago was good because it helped to prepare us for what happened during COVID. And we were also lucky.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're also, no, sorry. Just one last thing. We're also lucky as a joint licensee to have, you know, a TV studio where we could have a nice set and do it up just the way you would like a TV show.
Yes,
we had an audience. We had an audience, which isn't unheard of today. actually had an in-studio audience, and so at a certain time where they wouldn't be let in the door. It was just that whole kind of excitement of being on TV. So
That's wonderful. And this is a screenshot of, I think, one of the panel discussions you had. And I wanted to talk a little bit about things you've learned during this process. You talked about how you both bring value to each other's missions and how together you're able to create a shared narrative for your community around these topics that you cover. Can you talk about how the mission part of it, because I think that's very important to understand where each of you are coming from in this partnership?
Well, I think in order to partner, you need to make sure that you are partnering with someone that your organization feels is credible, has integrity, and their missions are similar. I think as we were discussing it recently, we realized our organization both, we want to educate and engage it's easy for together. And I think there's this trust here that we understand that what we're here to do is good journalism. And so when you know that going in, it makes it easy to partner and work together. And the fact that WFYI Side Effects and WFYI, they have more resources than we do, that also was a no-brainer. We have a staff of 2. While we do health stories, we can't do health stories to the extent that WFYI Side Effects does. So that being able to come alongside of us and give us health stories that focus on the things that we will focus on, which are disparities, and making sure that African Americans get the health care that they need or are aware of the disparity in health care or issues that would affect them more so community. That I think that just kind of makes things very simple. It was a very simple process for me to just get on board with this partnership.
Yeah, we were lucky that we both, was 2 well-established organizations with, so we were familiar with each other. So establishing the trust wasn't a big hurdle. That was there sort of from the beginning. If you were doing a partnership today, and we've done other collaborations with online organizations, as well as public radio stations. So it's sometimes you need a little bit of a conversation to make sure that you do share values. If it's not another like public radio station, but it's like a newer online only organization, to make sure that you are coming at the issue with the same values and the same purpose. Again, for Oseye and myself, that wasn't a big hurdle, but I could see where other partnerships, you might have to have a little more detailed conversation about what the goals are, how you're going to get there, and what's sort of fair game and what's off limits.
You guys had shared with me the 3 E's that you follow for your party mission. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, for our station is sort of our strategic plan. The elevator pitch is basically we want to educate, engage, and entertain our audience. And so, we do a lot of entertainment on PBS and radio as well. But this was more focused on the education and engagement. And it was, Oseye was saying the other day, she had sort of the same ease she came up with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, when I came to the Recorder in 2018, I came with educate, empower, and we do every story we do should do one or a combination or all 3. And then our previous vice president added in entertain. So we definitely were aligned with the E's. And I don't think we even knew that until recently. So
that's really cool. I'm sorry, you kind of cut out a little bit. So it's educate,
empower, engage, and entertain.
I think that's really important. And I think what Dave says about understanding who you're working with and that you have a mission that's similar is very important too. And then can you also talk about the shared narrative, the fact that this is an important issue in the communities you're covering? What does creating a shared narrative mean for you communities?
Us creating a shared narrative is that the focus was on the disparity. The focus is on, well, for this particular series, the focus was on that Black mothers and babies are dying. So when we realized that, we didn't have to really figure out, oh, well, we're not going to talk about this person to talk about it all. We had to figure out what would we leave out, because there was so much to discuss. And especially, we were talking about Indiana, but Indianapolis has a huge problem. I think, if I'm not, several of the zip codes, or the top 10 zip codes, several of them are located in Indianapolis, which is where we're based. So the shared narrative wasn't something that we had to really fight about. It was just like, we know there's this problem and we want to help people solve it. So I think for me, that's kind of where it really wasn't creating it, because we already knew what it was.
And I think that also it dovetails with, you know, having the same goal for your project, to make sure that you both, you know, talk it over up front, and what do we want to highlight? What do we see as the big problem? What do we want to go after? Because it would be, you know, so many of the topics are hugely broad, and you want to make sure you're, when you're focused on a particular project, you're really zeroing in on some specific aspect of that, and that you both understand that at the beginning, or at least give yourself, maybe you investigate it for a little while and then come together and say, this is where we're going to really dive in.
Mm-hmm.
That's important. We have a question here from Elaine Clark. The Recorder has a print format. WFYI is a broadcast outlet. How did you deal with sharing online content, and were stories replicated on both sites?
Well, we have a web presence as well. So the links, we'll just post them on our website. So our print product comes out once a week, and space obviously is at a premium. And because of the way ads and all that work, because we use articles. So it just works to put everything online. And we're trying to, since I've been here, my goal has been to boost our online presence. And getting content from WFYI Side Effects definitely plays a big part of that, is that we're getting, and it's not just any old content, it's good content, it's solid journalism content. I know, much to our disdain, the #1 online article for a very long time was how to know if your husband is gay.
Wow.
And it was published in, like, I want to say 2017, 2016.
Wow.
And until recently, until COVID started, it was until the protests, I think it was #1. And so much to, like I said, much to our disdain, we just couldn't understand. And it was not a news article, it was just some kind of content that I'm sure was put on our website to just drive traffic. And I just thought, this is not helping make us look like we're really journalists here. So now I'm glad finally, but that's when I see good content, that's what I want, versus, you know, this kind of stuff that just clickbait. I don't want clickbait.
And you do share your full story, right? When you publish on the Recorder site, is the full story from Side Effects.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
And that, you know, sharing online is relatively easy, as long as you discuss, like, deadline, you know, when you're going to release things, embargoes, and that sort of thing. So you're, you know, working as true partners and not, you know, scooping each other. For a radio station, though, audio is a little tougher. You know, you got to make sure that you have that covered as well. You know, if a partner has audio capabilities, it makes it much easier. Mm-hmm. In this case, we sort of assume that we're going to shoulder that load, mm-hmm. and then so most of the sharing will be digital.
Thank you. So what's that one thing, the one thing with this kind of partnership needs? We will let Ms. Aretha tell us. It is respect. It's just something I heard a lot from both Dave and Oseye when we were talking about this webinar. And what does that mean? So here are some quotes that I will read so they don't have to quote themselves. Dave, so many obstacles will pop up that if you don't have that respect, it won't work. Oseye, it's a no-brainer for the Recorder to work with a large news organization. The Recorder has a pulse on the community. WFYI reaches a different audience. I think this would be a great time for you guys to talk about sort of, Oseye, I think you had talked about what your audience's perspective of public radio and public media is, and like what this type of partnership with public media means to your audience. And then Dave, it's kind of the same question for you.
Well, I think Dave said earlier that it's no secret that public broadcast audience tends to be white, people just kind of are who the audience is. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that's all that listen or read or watch, but the majority of the audience does tend to be white. And so I think for the Recorder, for me, it's a chance to help diversify, if you will, WFYI Side Effects, the audience and the content, and to also bring our audience and introduce them to WFYI Side Effects. Because many people may think, you know, who listens to for, 90.1? I think that's our station here locally. I listen to it, but I don't know anyone else in my family that does. You know, I'm considered somewhat of a nerd. Obviously, I write for a living, so, but it just makes sense to kind of share cross pollinate, if you will, that audience and helping to expand everyone's horizons. To give WFYI Side Effects readers some information they may not have had, and they may not even know the Recorder exists. Even though we're a 125-year-old newspaper, we still are a secret to many in the community, because if you're not Black, you may not know. And for our community, you may not think that Fix has this kind of information, or you might think it just caters to its audience of liberal, upper class white people. You may not realize that you're missing a lot of good information, a lot of good news, a lot of things that are very important to your community when you don't listen or you don't watch.
Yeah, and yeah, as Oseye mentioned, you know, for us, the audience we have is primarily, you know, white, and I would guess upper middle class. I don't have the stats in front of me, but just from, you know, what I've seen, generally that kind of sums it up. So we, you know, as an organization, they could have, I guess, done a lot of outreach to try and reach an audience that's different and expand it. Working with the Recorder is sort of a shortcut to that, you know, that maybe our people will become more familiar with us. So that can be sort of an organizational goal. You know, for me, I'm a journalist, so I think in those terms. And for me, it's important really to make sure that we're covering all the voices in a particular story. And if we're doing a story about, you know, an issue that's important in the Black community, we need to understand that perspective, and we need to be talking to those folks and working with those folks when we can. So as a journalist, I think it's important to have these sorts of partnership, because that way you get the best story. And again, that's the way I think of this. You know, we're going to get a much better story by having a partnership with the Recorder than we could do on our own.
Can I add something to that? You just
Please.
said something that made me, you're building trust. That's the key, is the trust from the community. Is that many times stories are written about Black people and no one's so you're kind of just talking to doctor, all those people who have something to say, but you never talk to a Black person to find out how this really affects this person or this community. And I think one of the things that when I worked for a previous news organization, we had a Real People, Real News. You always want to go and talk to the real person that this affects as much as you can. And I think most journalism has tried to go that way, but it can be difficult. It can be difficult if you don't feel like you have those connections, you don't know anyone from that community reporter who that's who we talk to on a regular basis. It just makes it a lot easier to diversify that content and get that story that it may have been a little more difficult for you to do.
That's a great point. We also have a question here from Tracy Bauer. Could you describe the biggest obstacles and challenges in such a partnership, and what are the worst days like in a collaboration?
You want to start, Dave?
Okay. So, you know, knock on wood, we haven't had any bad days in this collaboration. So, but I can tell you from other collaborations that I've been in, I think the worst ones are where you don't share either the common values or you don't share a common goal for a particular project. That you're each, you know, I've been in, and I'm in a collaboration right now, a different one, where one of the partners dropped out sort of halfway through because the original goals changed and it no longer sort of fit their priorities. So it's really important to have that understanding at the beginning going in, and in making sure that you sort of stick to that road and don't let, you know, mission creep come in or any other detours come in that might endanger the collaboration. And I forgot, what was the first, now I talked about the second part, I forgot the first one, I'm sorry.
The biggest obstacles and challenges.
Yeah, well, again, I think the obstacles are making sure that you understand each other, you know, you have shared values and shared goals. And also that, you know, there are a lot of logistical problems along the way, but if you have that sort of foundation of trust, I think you can get over those logistical things pretty readily. You know, there are all sorts of questions about, like, how much time do you devote? Does each partner devote to it? You know, other priorities get in the way, and you got to sort of keep everybody focused on it because it's easy for people to get distracted by other things. So, but again, with the, you know, the basic trust, I think you overcome those.
From my perspective, I really haven't seen any. The challenge for me is keeping up. They're much quicker since you have a much bigger team. Things happen than what I can, as one person can. That's the biggest challenge for me. I don't have to deal with a lot of the planning. Our president and COO not involved in the making sure that things happen at the right time and all that. I'm just kind of like, I have. So I think some of those, like figuring out the time and all that stuff, that was not my, for the show, figuring out the time for the show that we did recently, that was not anything I had to worry about. I just had to show up and do my job. So that was probably the challenging part for them, is figuring out the time. I would say probably WFYI Side Effects probably has the more challenges, since you guys kind of you have your shows that come on, you know, you have to be in the studio, you know, all those kinds of things that you guys have to figure out that we don't have to deal with. So it's just, and I think for me, I'm kind of just easy peasy. It's just kind of like, I just appreciate it so much because I know our shortcomings. So I'm just like, yeah, whatever you guys want to do, sounds good to me. And that helps when you have a willing partner.
True. And just a logistical question from Yuko Kodama. What was the workflow? Who did the writing? Who edited? How was the work divided up?
So when we did our infant mortality stories, actually a reporter from WFYI Side Effects wrote part of it, and one of our reporters wrote part of it. And then they put it together, and then we I think we both edited it for our style and content. But I think, so it didn't really need much edit, because I think it was edited. It didn't have to do, we had to have to do too much. Like one of our styles is we've always capped black. Until recently, no one capped black until AP just recently did that change. So we've always capped black. So that was one of the things we've always, if we get a story, we'll cap the black. Workflow. I'm trying to think of what other have we, I think we've done a couple other stories together, but we've just kind of partnered and figured it out as we go. I don't think there's a set that worked best. I know before COVID happened, we were in talks with doing something on Black churches. And we had just started talking about it. We were just getting ready to have a reporter start to doing the work, and then COVID happened. And so that just kind of got set to the side while we started focusing on COVID and then the protests. And now we have so many other stories that we're talking about. So we may come back to that at some point, but it's not a priority right now.
And certainly for the audio piece, which, there was a text piece and then there was an audio piece. So we focused on the audio and did that reporting and editing just because that's our specialty. So that's another way that it broke down. I would add one more thing when you talk about, this sort of partnership and what can go wrong is, you want to make sure you have some buy-in from the folks above you too, that they're comfortable with you, partnering with an outside organization. Because if not, somebody upstairs might say, what's going on here? Why are we doing this? So you have to sell it a little bit, I think, within the organization to make sure that they buy into it. And then, luckily, we have, on both of our organizations, we have presidents who are committed to this partnership. So that wasn't a problem. It wasn't like a hard sell, but I could see that in some other cases, it could be problematic.
Good point. So speaking of the news of the day, taking your partnership to the COVID-19 and protest level, because of the trust you had already developed with your previous series, you were able to take this partnership and use it to cover other equity issues affecting Black and Brown communities in the area, in your region. So you've done several things to that effect, besides stories, sharing digital stories. You co-hosted Facebook Live panel discussions. You had an hour-long TV specials that was aired on prime time, and you're continuing to plan more reporting, as we could tell. And I wanted to show people just a little bit of what it looked like, that TV special, and have you guys talk about the reaction that you got to the special, and also the fact that I think it came together very quickly, from what I understand, and just talk about the process behind this. And for those who can't see, there's Oseye right there at the table. She's the co-host of this. And then speaking of CEOs that Dave was just talking about, they actually made an appearance at the beginning of the show to welcome viewers. And I think that had an impact on letting people know that this was a very important topic. So take it away.
Well, this came together rather quickly in a matter of days, actually. It's really amazing how fast it came together. Part of it is when Dave reached out to me, I was very, I was just like, yeah, I would love to do it. Let me talk to Robert, because I don't know. I can't give you the go-ahead since he's my supervisor, but I was on board immediately. Excuse me. Had a little tickle there. So we were already, the Recorder already had ship with New America, which is a think tank, and WFYI had kind of came along, and we were already doing some web shows. I just started calling them web shows now because they just seem to be more shows than webinars anymore. So we were doing some virtual town halls, and then WFYI and WFYI Side Effects came along and started and became another partner. So just kind of, to me, a continuation of what we were already doing. Excuse me. sorry about that. So it's kind of continuation. And then Robert was like, no brainer. When can we do it? Talk day while I get this coughing out of me.
Dave, why don't you take over?
Sure. While you get a drink.
Clear that tickle.
Yeah, Oseye and I were working together just a few weeks earlier, I guess, on some webinars that the Recorder had started, and we sort of asked, could we help promote them? Could we, because they were health related, could we, help supply experts if needed? Could we answer questions from your audience that we could post on our website and also on your website? We could provide some sort of expertise on the health issues. And then, as she mentioned, on a Monday, our head of content at the station said, we really should try to do something quickly on a response to all the demonstrations that had broken out around the country and in Indianapolis too. So luckily, when I talked to Oseye, the Recorder had a Facebook Live event scheduled for that following Saturday. Mm-hmm. And after talking, it seemed like we were able to quickly reach an agreement where the guests from that Saturday event became primarily the guests for the TV show. Mm-hmm. So we we started talking about it on Monday, and the show aired on Thursday night. So it really was very quick. And Oseye did a great job with one of our anchors, who was the other co-host, Terry D, in pulling questions together in a really short period of time to get it all ready. So again, yeah. It was one of those fortunate coincidences that they had an event that we could morph into the TV show very quickly. They had contacted folks in the community who would be great guests, and that worked out really well.
Yes, it did. It really worked out well. And I have to say that Terry D is a veteran radio host, and I used to listen to her on another radio station. So being there with someone from the radio, it really made me step my game up, because I was like, oh, she has a radio voice for real. She knows what she's doing here. So it really helped me improve my game here when it comes to hosting and moderating.
What was some of the responses you got to this? I saw that at least on the FYI Facebook page, you had dozens of shares of the video, and on the Recorders page. I was just wondering what you took comments, while the show was happening, I believe. What were you hearing from people?
We definitely had a lot of questions coming in during the show. People actually. It's funny, I shared with you about my dad. My dad was just so tickled. Even though I'm like, Dad, I've been doing these town halls. And he actually called me to say that he's watching me on TV like the next day. And I was because of just the excitement he had for me. But he's like, TV's different. It's different. And not just my dad, but when I think about now as well, many people on my Facebook friends, even though I share our virtual town halls every week when we're doing them. This is what got the biggest response of everyone, though. This is the one that everyone said, I watched you, I saw you, I'll be watching. And I'm like, so you're not watching any other time? Is the TV that's getting you, huh? It's the TV. So I think it just had that effect on people of, now everyone's kind of doing the virtual town halls on Facebook Live. But the idea that it was on TV, I think it just gave it that much more importance, So there's something to be said about television still, definitely. And that's we don't have that platform. So, but maybe we need to look into a TV station or the Recorder.
Yeah, and that's, when we talk about the future, that's something that we want to make a part of this partnership. We want to do it on all platforms. So we'll be talking about other ways to do TV specials, whether they're, panel discussions or a deep dive into a topic maybe. We haven't really had those discussions yet on the detail level, but we'll be talking about all options, in the next few months.
I just love that story about your dad being so tickled that you were on TV. I think like oftentimes, and me coming from the newspaper world, we kind of just forget that television is a huge way, information medium for a lot of people. And like you said, it's like, unless I see it on TV, for a lot of people, they don't believe it. They don't know how to access it. It's like TV just is a lot more, I don't know, approachable, believable. It seems bigger. So
yes,
for
sure.
So hilarious to me, but I think it's very important to remember. So for any one out there, if they have a collaboration with their local public TV station, it's a wonderful, it would be a wonderful idea to pursue that more. And primetime made a difference too, I think. So let's get to why now. Why are we talking about this right now, even though I should have been talking about it all along? This type of collaboration strengthens journalism. And I love this quote that Ashia said from what she took me while we were putting this together. The climate now is right for these partnerships. People see value in this, and we see value in this. Can you expand on that a little more?
I guess for me, it is a bigger organization, media organization that does what they do so well. And like I said earlier, has credibility and integrity and respects the recorder and what we bring to the table. It's not a partnership where we're made to feel as though we're subordinate, as though, well, we know you're small, but it's no. We know that you're small, but we're here to make you bigger, to make you feel bigger, for pulling us and, pat us on the head, kind of that, I guess, paternalistic kind of partnership. It's definitely not that. I definitely feel like they really see us for who we are and respect the recorder. And that, why wouldn't you try to partner with an organization who doesn't do what you do? That's the beauty of it, is that we do what we do well, they do what they do well. And when you bring it all together, that synergy, that creativity, that it just brings to me excitement about journalism. And I think that's what we're all here for, is to do good journalism. I've been doing journalism my whole life. This is all I know. I tried to leave many times, but I never was able to. So it just must be my calling. So my whole adult life, since college, I've done journalism. So, and to partner with someone who does good journalism, it's just exciting to me when I hear other organizations say that's what we do. So, and that's how I feel. I don't know if my 20-year-old me would have understood how much I love journalism, but I really, really do. I love the news.
Again, for us, I think this is, this is really a seminal time in American history. And to cover it well as a journalist, I think you need to sort of rethink what you've been doing, look for new ways to understand the issues and the problems that we face. And, you have to sort of, humble yourself and not be afraid to reach out for help when you need help. And I think this, there's so many issues about equity out there now that we need to better understand as journalists. So this is a great time for partnerships. And again, this is between us and the recorder, but there are all sorts of other partnerships out there. I know Minneapolis, their public broadcasting radio has an interesting partnership with Sahan Journal, which is it's really a publication for refugees. And they do really interesting work. So that, it's a great time to be creative. Also, the fact with the newspaper industry collapsing, it gives us a real opportunity to reach out to some of the new nonprofit online only organizations that have popped up. So I think it's a really dynamic time in journalism overall. And when you combine that with, what's happening in America, it just makes sense to try and do things differently.
So, Fred, we're saying do it. So how do you do it? So this is what we suggest. If you're reaching out for the first time to collaborate with a local media organization, you should definitely be honest. Explain that you want to do things differently. Expand on that a little more.
It's kind of like the elephant in the room. So you just need to approach it as, this is why we want to do it. Because if you haven't already tried this partnership, relationship, at least where you reached out and worked together occasionally, then there's going to be a little success now. What do you want? Because it makes you look a little opportunistic. So if you're just honest and you say, I never thought this, because I think many times, one thing that COVID has taught is creativity. If nothing else, we are doing things that we've never done before, and we're finding creative ways to do everything. So that is kind of how you can say, I never even thought about this until recently. And I think one of the things too, you don't have to necessarily do what we do, but you could do that works for you and in your area too. Don't try to necessarily find the Black newspaper to partner with. Maybe you don't have a Black newspaper to partner with. Maybe say a nonprofit, or you have something else that you can collaborate with. But I think try to do it and just recognize, I never thought of this until now, because you didn't. And I think that will just go a long way in putting everyone on equal footing to say, we're going to be honest in this relationship, period. And you start off with honesty. So there's no wondering about what you're trying to do. And that goes back to Dave's point about selling it to your higher ups, because they're going to go talk to their higher ups. So they need to explain to them like why this benefits us. And so being honest, it definitely goes a long way.
Yeah, I think, again, that's sort of, having a good understanding, a good foundation of trust and honesty is crucial for any sort of partnership. Otherwise, you'll run into too many problems and things will go wrong. But if you can establish that from the beginning, it's great. I would just add, don't necessarily worry about biting off a gigantic project at the beginning. I think, if you spend too much time worrying about all those details, you might never get anything done. I'm a big believer in, perfect is the enemy of the good, and that you should go ahead and dive in and try something small. And then if it works, try something bigger and just keep the momentum going instead of spending a lot of time trying to figure out the perfect giant project. Mm-hmm. And I think that helped us. We collaborated on a few things, and now, because of what's going on, we have really great opportunity for a bigger project.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really good advice. I know that we've heard from some stations who are interested in collaborating or afraid about how it might look awkward. But I think this idea of just being honest and explaining where you're coming from goes a long way. So also do be sincere and listen. Explain that this is not a token gesture and your vision on how both groups can benefit.
I think that goes back to the being honest. I think when you explain why you want to do this and the benefits, and listen to the other side's concerns and share your concerns, that will definitely make everyone understand that we're out here to do good journalism. I think that you want to, and I think maybe it works so easily for us is that we have our ease in common. Maybe that's just what made it happen so well. So maybe look for people your missions are pretty similar, so but when you have that initial conversation, it has to happen in the very beginning. You can't wait until 2 or 3 weeks after you've already started dealing with each other to say, oh, by the way, you know, we need to talk about these things. You need to do it up front. And maybe the first time you will find that this is not the partnership that you want. Maybe you need to move on and look for something else. But, or maybe you realize that you need to rethink, you know, your position and because what they're saying makes sense. So I think that conversation from the very beginning is what will really help move things forward.
Yeah, and as Oseye mentioned, listening is important to make sure that you're not forging ahead with your plan and imposing it on your partner, but you're really trying to understand what they want out of this as well. You know, and with a large organization and a small organization, you know, there might be questions of resources. So how do you get over that? How do you make sure that, again, you're not pushing too much work on a smaller organization and taking away from important priorities that they have? You know, you have to, again, listen to each other to make sure that you're understanding what's needed and what you can deliver comfortably without, you know, having problems of your own.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And the last on our do list is understand it's not advocacy, that your goal is truthful journalism and puts facts and community at the center. Advocacy is a word that comes up a lot in discussions, especially with community media organizations. Please talk about this more, because I think you guys have some really great perspectives on this.
Well, for me, I think advocacy has a negative connotation. And it definitely means pushing an agenda, pushing propaganda, probably is a better word than agenda. That's not the case. I do say for Black people, we advocate for the Black community, but we do that using journalism. And so we do that in telling the truth and being government watchdogs and doing the things that we all know that good journalism is. So for me to say that I'm not an advocate, it's not advocacy, but it is to people who don't have a voice, who, when we have maternal and infant mortality, when we know that Black women are dying and their babies are at an astronomical rate, we can't just sit there. We can't ignore that. We can't say, well, we don't want to be an advocate for getting maternal health. You know, no, we need to write that story. We can't miss the story when we know there's police brutality happening to Black people. We had a shooting. We've had a couple shootings here. We can't say, well, we don't want to advocate for that. No, that's good journalism, though. Calling out police for brutality is good journalism. So, from my perspective, everything we do is based on the root of what journalism actually is, versus trying to push an agenda or deliver propaganda to make people, to sway people one way or another. We tell the truth, and the reader can make up his own mind, his or her own mind, where they stand, and that's what we're supposed to do as journalists.
Yeah, and we're lucky that we share those. Again, as journalistic organizations, we share those values of, you know, highlighting problems and trying to point people to solutions, sort of fundamental to both of our missions, which is great. I guess if you were, you know, trying to do a partnership with a non-journalism organization, it might get a little dicier, and that's where you would have to really talk about what the contribution is going to be. So the journalism doesn't become, you know, tainted by advocacy work. We're in another small partnership. Again, we publish a lot of health information about coronavirus lately, and we've been working with a group lately to try to get it translated for Burmese refugees. And now the folks we're working with are not a journalistic organization, but again, we're supplying the content, they're supplying more of a service. So think we're going to be, you know, it's a good kind of partnership to have. And they can help distribute it in their community because they have better contacts in the community than we do. So there are ways that you can work with other groups, maybe not on pure journalism reporting, but still to get your message out to folks.
I think that's important. And I think, Dave, at one point you talked about how, you know, technically side effects could be considered an advocacy group for health issues, for health reform. So I think a lot of it comes down to perhaps perspective. If you're advocating for accountability, if you're advocating for addressing inequities, if you're advocating for transparency, that's all journalistic, you know, all falls along the journalistic ethics. So I think that's an important thing for people that need to define for themselves as they head into relationships like this. So we have just a few minutes left in our conversation. I know people have asked questions along the way, which is awesome. You know, we can take a minute to see if anybody else has any questions. Otherwise, please take down these emails if you want to reach out to any one of us for more information. We will also be sharing the link to this slide deck and this webinar once we get it out of our recorder. And yes, thank you so much, Oseye and Dave, and my team members for helping out today. This has been really wonderful. I really enjoyed your conversation and learning from you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great.
Happy to take questions.
Thank you. And Jen reminds me to plug our next America Amplified webinar session, which is on July 31st, where we're going to be talking to community organizers about what journalists can learn from them and vice versa. And that should be an interesting discussion too. So thanks for that reminder. And I hope I'll see you all again. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.